once again, my little strange-o-maniacs, being loud and very proud in order to make sure that we are properly heard on this recording. I'm going to be giving you a little synopsis or loose readout of my own book, Ed Wood, American Arthouse Pioneer, a history of Edward D. Wood Jr. and the unusual films that made him famous, by none other than the magnificent Jack Strange, a.k.a. Shenandoah Seth C., that is me, and this is my book, and with some of my drawings combined with a number of the public domain photographs and other assorted imagery related to Edward D. Wood Jr. and his life and times. Now I'm going to be scrolling through my book, hopefully trying to make it better as I narrate it, and trying to get my words out to the best of my ability as it pertains to this documentary film narrative. Of course, I kind of prefer my documentaries and my audio narratives to sound a little bit differently than I would the way I write some of my books, which may not always make logical sense depending on, but usually, I format my paragraphs to fit like a square block because I like the way it looks, and sometimes I kind of cut around the English language in order to do so. I also have a lot of commas and things that hopefully make more sense in print than maybe they'll sound through the audio. But we're going to do our best because I want to use an audio to make my own loose little documentary on Edward D. Wood Jr. And you're going to start by hearing this audio clip combined with hopefully later on some useful film footage and whatever I can put together to make my own little special documentary on Edward D. Wood Jr., which is relatively easy to make given the fact that a lot of his content is now in the public domain. Edward D. Wood left no heirs, although I think the closest one right now would be Bob Blackburn, who heads up his wife Kathy's estate. Ed Wood, I don't know if he was ever officially married to Kathy or if he was kind of like a common law husband and wife situation, because he never officially got divorced from Norma McCarty, who he was married with at the time that he did Plan 9 from Outer Space, although he met Kathy soon after. And in fact, when I was writing this book, I had a little bit of a dispute with Bob Blackburn when confronting him about the dates and times, which he knows to be, an issue at best. When Wood is regarded as a philanderer and a womanizer, it's never explicitly said who he philandered and womanized with, but in my opinion, and just my respective opinion of after reviewing Edward D. Wood's life, his private life and everything, it appears to me that he had more than one woman at any given time, or at least at the time that he met Kathy. And it's not something that people like to talk about because it makes Wood look a little less perfect. But I think Blackburn and everyone else who has handled Wood know that he's not a perfect man. He has quite a number of issues with alcohol, and like I said, he won that womanizer reputation for a reason. The big issue, though, is Kathy was the woman he was with at the time he died. She was the one that stayed with him for the rest of his life, and to get in the way of their sacred marriage, it might come as somewhat offensive to some Ed Wood fans, especially if you are a big fan of the Johnny Depp movie, which was made about Ed Wood, called Ed Wood, which features her and him in a more glamorous light. It also takes a big shit on some of the other women in Ed Wood's life because it depicts Dolores, his girlfriend Dolores, as somewhat of an airhead. I want to say an airhead. Sarah Jessica Parker plays her as kind of like a bitter actress, or an actress with less talent even. Dolores was very talented, and she went on to make, documentaries, documentary, but she went on to have a musical career, writing music for Elvis Presley and Nat King Cole. And then Vampira also is depicted as somewhat of a bitch in the movie, which I'm sure that at the height of her fame, when she could pick and choose where she went, she may have been a little bit stuck up. But if you watch some of the subsequent interviews and clips of the real Vampira, I feel that there is a great artist there that has yet to be appreciated. So this book is here to give you one of the things I was proud of with this book is kind of the highlight it gives to the women in Ed Wood's life, who are kind of shrugged aside as not being the best ladies. And also that same movie kind of depicts Loretta King, actress Loretta King from Bride of the Monster, in an unsavory fashion, saying that she refused liquids as if that was humanly possible. She drank water. She said that she didn't drink, so that might have been, she didn't know where this rumor came about. But it appears to have originated from Ed Wood's own writing, because Wood would like to exaggerate, never get in the way of a good story. And he knew what a lot of the people wanted to hear and tried to give it to them, on top of whatever his own personal preferences and fetishes were. His movies were kind of like, as I would describe, somewhat of a variety film, if you will. Over in like places like China and Japan, like when they were making like the Jackie Chan movies over where he actually came from, he was sort of like the Buster Keaton of China, and they would have like comedy, they would have action, they would have romance. One movie was meant to serve a multi-purpose. So the idea of the genre art is somewhat of an American concept. Like it's either a horror movie or a comedy, or maybe it's a horror comedy, but it's not 5 things all in one movie, except on very special circumstances. And some of those movies go on to be huge successes, and other ones try to overreach. But whenever you see an Ed Wood movie, you'll rarely see just a straight out-and-out film. There'll always be something quirky, interesting, and eccentric to it, which is why Ed Wood has become so distinctive. Now, the bigger question with regards to Ed Wood is whether he was in on the joke or not, which I believe he was. Sometimes he was very much in on the joke, and other times he took his writing absolutely seriously. So seriously that, it might hurt his feelings if you told him that he wrote like an 8th grader, which he sometimes did. Sometimes he wrote rather simply, and then other times, it was for use and function, meaning that he might refer to Bela Lugosi's character as Dracula in the script, even if the character of Dracula is not explicitly mentioned. This is something he did for Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was loosely supposed to have been shot. He's supposed to have shot footage of Lugosi for an unpublished film called The Vampire's Tomb, or The Ghoul Goes West, or whatever the hell he was working on at the time. The Ghoul Goes West, I believe, and man, I'm getting sidetracked, I believe that to have been a child of something that was offered to Tony McCoy back when he was working with the McCoys, and would have crumbled to dust as soon after Bela Lugosi's death, or when Wood himself may have been trying to venture out on his own. In which case, Edward D. Wood Jr., according to fellow exploiteur filmmaker by the name of Samuel Z. Arthouse, referred to him as a quote-unquote one-lung producer, meaning that Wood was just barely producing films by the skin of his teeth, and often with the great assistance of others. He rarely ever put up his own budget, although he could come up with a few $100s by himself. He seemed to congregate and live in somewhat in and out of the strip clubs and the gay community, in which case he was himself a cross-dresser, but not quite a homosexual, as he will make clear in the Glenda film. Although, just given the nature of some of his dialogue and writings over the years, sometimes I have my questions as to his sexuality. My dogs are barking, and hopefully they'll calm down. Hopefully no one's at the door, but I'll continue with this because I'm on somewhat of a roll. Edward D. Wood Jr., where did I leave off, and where did I want to continue? I suppose, like I said, I was first introduced to him through a children's book on vampires, which, obviously was designed to tell you that there are no real vampires, except for some people who might suffer anemia or be serial killers and everything else, whatever. And at the end of the book, it also went into some of the media depictions. It had a illustrated version of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, which I really wish I still had that book because it was one of the best comic illustrations of Bram Stoker's Dracula I'd ever seen and have seen since. And really, Bram Stoker's novel isn't very long. It was very easy to capture in this, little children's book. But in listing some of the depictions of vampires and specifically Dracula at the end of the book, it showed a filmography for Bela Lugosi where, as I was surprised to learn, I mean, he portrayed a vampire quite often, but only played Dracula twice. But one of his last film appearances was, in fact, in Edward D. Wood Jr.'s famous film, Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was done on a very low budget, relatively low, not extremely low. The money was put up by the Baptist Church of Beverly Hills, which wanted to do, by a producer by the name of J. Edward Reynolds, or Edward J. Reynolds, depending on what variation that is, who wanted to make a series of films about the apostles. And similar to Vampira herself, who apparently wanted to become an evangelist after her Vampira career, this little church had put up the money, and Edward D. Wood Jr. had convinced them that if they started making horror and science fiction films, that they could easily segue the profits into making a series of movies about all 12 apostles. It didn't quite work out that way. Plan 9 was something of a bomb, or if it made money for anyone, it didn't make money for them, and Ed Wood had to quickly sell the rights and unload the film to whatever random distributors went out with it. And there's a series of conflicting stories, and hopefully some of this will be sorted out by more responsible authors. My book is mostly a synopsis of what I've been able to see and keep track of as a fan of Ed Wood and the Ed Wood related media. But there are other authors, very serious authors by the name of Joe Pontalillo, who found Edward D. Wood's war records, and I got his little book on Edward D. Wood Jr.'s service in the Pacific. And it was a very, very enlightening and informative book, and it also told a story that was just as exciting as we would expect from the real man, even if it did not corroborate any of his alleged combat experience, in which case Edward D. Wood Jr., knowing what people wanted to see and hear, would always tell everyone that he was involved in active combat during World War II, and that he got his teeth knocked out by the butt of a Japanese soldier's rifle. And we came to find out that he arrived on one of the last waves to recover bodies from the battles of Tarawa, I call it Tarawa, and he lost his teeth at some point, possibly from a hazing ritual, and never saw active combat. He experienced minor bombing raids, although, when they say he experienced minor bombings, I don't know how you describe minor bombings other than the fact that, not as many people died like in Tarawa. But for those who knew about the Battle of Tarawa, they assumed that Wood was one of the few hundred that survived from one of the last waves, and that has since been proven not to be the case. Wood didn't receive a Purple Heart. He was not wounded in action. He suffered a skin condition, and he contracted syphilis from a hooker. He contracted roundworms, which deformed his legs and gave him like something of a rash on top of some of the syphilis-related injuries. So he just a series of STDs and parasites from the islands and whoever he may have come into contact with is what put Ed out of active duty. And he took on his other role as a desk clerk, where he recorded intelligence and he was filing stuff. And Wood was a writer all of his life, someone who liked to type and always seemed to want to get in the media. He liked films, and he was given a camera at the age of 12, which he used to record, apparently, the last voyage of the Hindenburg airship. Now, what I describe in my book is that the airship little did I ever know, was a German Nazi-manufactured airship prior to World War II, which made a number of transatlantic flights. That means it went back and forth between the two continents, the two American continents and Europe, and even at one time personally flew Adolf Hitler. Now, I famously saw something. I thought there was more than one of these, because even though Indiana Jones is not a historical film, we saw a scene in The Last Crusade where they knocked someone off of an airship, and I presumed that it was, a different airship. But lo and behold, I think that Indiana Jones might take place prior to World War II, because it features a scene in which the Nazis are burning books when they're just kind of on the rise, and the Hindenburg vessel may have still been in use around the world, before the later hostilities. The Nazis were already controversial for whatever they were espousing, but they were still allowed to do business with the United States and fly a commercial aircraft. In which case, they had this giant Zeppelin, like blimp-like thing, which incinerated into flames from static. They don't know the exact reason, but they presume that static energy ignited the hydrogen and blew up the vessel. And there were some survivors. I don't know however many and how few or less, but not everyone died. But it was a gigantic explosion. And Wood didn't see the explosion, but he filmed the airship floating by Poughkeepsie, New York, which is just south of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's boyhood home and longtime retreat at Hyde Park, right along the Hudson River. My father comes from upstate New York, and he might be able to tell you a little more about anything relating to that. But this is something that Wood first experienced, and this explosion of the Zeppelin may have been a sign of things to come, perhaps for America, if not Ed Wood's later film career, because very soon we went into World War II, and Wood would go on to serve as a Marine in the Pacific, getting inspired and enamored by the what do you call it, the posters following the attacks on Pearl Harbor and everything, and he did what any American man would do, and he joined the armed services. And let's see here, we're slowing down from our momentum a little bit. I don't know how long I've been recording. I think I'm at the 17-minute mark, which ain't bad. We've covered a lot of ground compared to what I usually do, and we're still going, and we're still getting. There's never a shortage of interesting things to discuss with regards to Edward D. Wood Jr. And for my book, I'm just going to describe it to you if I'm not going to read it all out per se. I started off with, like I said, whatever pictures I could conceivably grab without being sued. So I tried not to feature any kind of public domain. I tried not to feature any kind of copyrighted material that I couldn't control. This is a book I wanted to control 100% on my own. Right now, I didn't. And then I inserted a few drawings in it too, because if there was a image that I couldn't personally control, I decided to do a drawing of it. And you see a few neat drawings. It's not quite one of your usual strange look books like the one I did with Custer, but it has a few drawings of some interesting people. And I hope to do more tonight if I find the time. Following his return from World War II, Wood, remained in the service for a little while, and then he took advantage from a theatrical program that was offered to him through the GI Bill, and then that's where Ed Wood produced some of his first plays, according to Joe Pontalillo, and the Plan 9 Crunch video up on YouTube. Go check that out. Plan 9 Crunch interview with Joe Pontalillo. I think it's called The Unknown War of Edward D. Wood Jr. I'll post some stuff hopefully later. But Wood returned to the United States, and he met he was involved in shooting commercials, and then he met a young aspiring filmmaker by the name of Crawford John Thomas, and together both of them were fans of filmmakers such as D.W. Griffith, which would play an important role in the story I make here, because Wood seemed to favor like a documentary style of film. Even though he made horror movies and outlandish, unusual things, he favored a documentary style where he often presented whatever he was talking about in the form of a public message. So Glen or Glenda is more or less his life story. He was a transvestite, and it was designed, it was originally conceived to be the Christine Jorgensen story, and it was supposed to be in relation to Christine Jorgensen, who was the first male-to-female sex change. Wood got a hold of producer George Weiss, who, when Jorgensen was asking too much money to cover her biopic, Wood offered his services as a writer and director, and he rewrote the script to cover just barely a glimpse of the Jorgensen story, and then more so along the lines of his transvestism. This film was, like I said, Wood directed his own biopic from the very beginning. So for those of you who are fans of the Tim Burton, Johnny Depp biopic, this film, Glen or Glenda, is Wood in his own words on the screen as himself in some of his cross-dressing variety. Now, it's not 100%, true to life, but the things that pertain to him are all there. It's a very interesting film, and he has a really great role. It's one of the strangest roles, and Lugosi really didn't want to do this until his wife encouraged him to take it. By the way, his wife was still with him at the time they produced Glen or Glenda, unlike what they show in the movie. But Lugosi, as I determined, and I didn't know, I think everyone else has come to accept this the same as I have, Lugosi has a role in what is more or less God in the story. He's the overlord of the universe, looking over the lives of different people and casting judgment, disdain, or joy on whoever he decides to take mercy or favor upon. And there's a line in there which I think is one of the greatest of Lugosi's career, where he says, people all doing something, to that effect. One is right because, one is wrong because he does right. Others right because he does wrong. And that was a really great. I'm kind of rambling a bit. I better cut this short because I can't speak intelligently for more than 10 or 15, 20 minutes, and I'm trying to get a lot out there with regards to this book. My book is a relatively short book. It's about 200 pages long, more or less. I have two versions out currently. One is the copyright safe version, the one I hope not to get sued for, and then the other one has a few sensitive materials which are designed to, if I get them approved, I might release the version in full. And I'm also adding drawings all the time. Whenever I have a good drawing of Ed Wood, I'm trying to put this into the book. And it's a really nice little book. Covers just the main points. I try not to get too much into his adult film career, although continuing on in the Ed Wood saga, and I have some ideas as to what I might call this. Wood relied on different lifeboats throughout his film career, and one of them, starting with Crawford and then Lugosi and then Dolores, there was always someone that helped him produce these films and gave him the opportunity and chance. It wasn't ever like a big studio or whatnot, but there was always someone kind of helping behind him. And one of the last people who gave Wood film work, serious film consideration, was Stephen C. It's A.C. Stevens, a.k.a. Stephen Apostoloff, who employed Wood as a producer in some of his softcore pornographic films. These were all naked lady films. They weren't, they sometimes did porn, but usually they were just nude films. And Wood was in there as a writer for about a handful of films, and then sometimes a screen gopher. Apostoloff gave him $500 and Wood danced on his desk, as legend has it. But Wood's alcoholism was holding him back from taking a greater role with Stephen C. Apostoloff, as well as the fact that their choice of films were in the sexual category as opposed to the horror science fiction realm, which we all would have preferred Ed Wood to have continued. Now, while Wood was making all these naked lady movies, other contemporaries such as Roger Corman were trying to relive the past of the Universal film era more successfully with whatever actors were still alive. In which case, Wood never got much beyond Bela Lugosi, but he was in contact with John Carradine, Lon Chaney Jr., and Boris Karloff at one point in his life. When those projects fell through, he took to writing pornographic novels and working for Stephen Apostoloff. Stephen Apostoloff was, although a low-budget producer, he liked to live kind of the Hollywood high life, and he was a Greek who went to California and believed that, in Wisconsin you make cheese, and in California you make movies, or so they discussed amongst each other in the Plan 9 Crunch interview with author Joe Blevins, who wrote the book on Stephen Apostoloff and Ed Wood called Dad Made Dirty Movies. A very good book that I still want to get my hands on, and from a very great author who publishes a weekly blog about Ed Wood called Ed Wood Wednesdays. And like I said, these two guys, Blevins and Blackburn, have been very nice to me in approaching them about the Wood subject. Now, when I make books, though, I'm very careful about not letting anyone tell me what to write, so I'm maintaining the independence of my project. But these guys are very good guys, and nothing's wrong with them. So anyway, with that, I'm going to leave this program short, and I'm going to return to Ed Wood over and over again as I have more and more to tell you. For now, this is the Magnificent Jack Strange, a.k.a. Shenandoah C. That's me, with, in this case, a rather short and sweet, less than half an hour program, which I hope you'll still find fun and interesting with regards to the life, the life and career of Edward D. Wood Jr. You will see a lot of speech impediments every now and then in my podcast. I'm trying to speak loud and proud so that we can actually make this, as audible on YouTube. So with that ado, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you and God bless.